Hello, everyone. I'm meteorologist Ted Keller, and this is today's edition of Severe Thunderstorm Outlooks. We just take a look at each day that has significant risk of severe thunderstorm hazards, which of course would include hail, damaging winds, and a possible tornado. So we'll start with today, Tuesday, and the Storm Prediction Center (SPC) uses 5 categories, with the green being the lowest and the 5 being the highest. And these are categorical, meaning that they include all of the risks that I just mentioned. And they put a coverage, basically, percentage on it. It's kind of a combination of coverage and also a little bit of intensity, but they have a separate scale that breaks down the individual hazards and their intensity estimations, and we'll cover that here in a minute. But this just is like a broad brush. When you look at this, you just say, okay, level 2, that's a pretty significant risk of severe weather up there in Minneapolis, South Dakota. I'll show you a close-up of that. Then the marginal risk, which is the lowest, meaning severe thunderstorms are possible. Coverage, though, very sporadic. That's that green. There's little pockets of that showing up all over the place around Dallas, into Louisiana, and out through Virginia and parts of the Carolinas. So usually what I do on this report then is I'll zoom in on one or more of the more significant areas so you can see some of the towns involved here. So you see Billings is on the edge of this level 2 area, Rapid City is in it, Pierre, Watertown, Aberdeen, all those towns in South Dakota you may be familiar with. And so then that gives you a better idea of the detail. And then I kind of break it down, especially on day 1. So with the SPC issues their forecast, day 1 would be today, which is Tuesday, and then day 2, Wednesday, day 3, Thursday, and they will actually forecast all the way out to day 8. Not much goes on this time of year that far out. High pressure ridges dominate a lot of times, so your severe weather is kind of on the decrease, but that actually can get pretty active. And this year was active into June and even into early July before it finally settled down a little bit here. So you're looking at the tornado risk. Sorry about that. I got a little explanation pathway there. And so this is not real high, and typically in the summer you don't see it very high. So that's 2%. What that means is 2% chance of any strength tornado within 25 miles of any point or any town, however you want to look at it. So it does exist in that slight area, but increasingly in the summer, the tornado risk is replaced a lot with the severe wind risk. But I will show you NATOcast, which actually has all 3 products. It has tornado, that's in the name, but also wind and hail. And today we'll just look at the tornado risk. So it agrees for the most part, 2% chance in kind of a longer area perhaps, but in general agreement with what the Storm Prediction Center has forecast for today. On the wind risk side of things, we have a 15% chance of a 59 mile per hour gust or higher. That's in the yellow. And then the new thing that they started this year at SPC was to try to assign intensity levels to that. So the hatched area, and these are not always going to agree, is an estimate of what the maximum wind strength might be. So for the most part, then they're saying everything in this black area, most of the winds, and if you just add up these 2 percentages here, so you got 55 and 31, so that's 86% chance of it being below hurricane force, which is 75 miles per hour. So yeah, it just attempts to give you an idea what your percentage chance of not just a low point severe wind risk, but how is it going to break down potentially on the higher end of the scale. So that's how that works. And again, the percentages don't always match up. So if you have broadly a 15% chance of a severe wind at its minimal, which is the 59, what this is saying is that even though there's a higher chance of severe wind here, over here where there isn't hatching, the probability that it's going to exceed, up into these higher categories is very low. Meanwhile, back here, it's a little bit higher. And then meanwhile, back here where it's only brown at 5%, so it's a lower chance overall of getting a severe wind, but if it does occur, it's going to be at the same intensity probabilities as something that happens over here. Anyway, so that's what that means. And this is a perfect example. So the severe hail risk on the for the third possible severe weather hazard, at least in terms of the main 3. We're not talking about flooding here. That's a separate issue, separate graphics. But a 15% chance of severe hail, that's 1 inch in diameter or more, but it heavily weighs over here for intensity. So if you look at this, there's only 2 categories of intensity for hail. And most of this is going to stay below the 2-inch mark. In fact, there's a 50-50 chance it'll be somewhere between 1 and 1.5 inches, and then the probability decreases quite a bit after that. So this is CSU, a learning machine model run by Colorado State University. They do all 3 panels, tornado, hail, and wind. So you can see how they match up. They are really emphasizing this area for wind damage out here in the Carolinas. which is interesting because that was in a marginal risk area. So, but again, that means that while there may only be a slight coverage chance of a severe thunderstorm, the probability that it will produce damaging winds here is pretty high, 30%. So that's how you interpret that. Then we go to Wednesday. We have two areas, kind of, so we have actually one broad area of level 1, and then we have some embedded level 2 areas out here in Nebraska, Kansas, Colorado, and then another one from Iowa and Minnesota up into Wisconsin. So those are the higher risk areas for Wednesday. There is a tornado risk, again, pretty subdued this time of year, but a lot of times in the summer it goes away completely. So just saying that it's there means there is at least an outside chance of a tornado somewhere in that area from central Wisconsin back to around Mason City, Iowa, including Rochester, Minnesota. And then on the wind side for tomorrow, just a 15% probability, no hatching on that one, and the hail risk really doesn't even show up at all. I usually don't show it if it's not at least 15%, so it's 5% for hail on Wednesday. CSU agrees with the wind assessment being the bigger risk. It also highlights that area out in the Carolinas. So get used to that because this area out here shows up consistently for the next almost week for some severe weather hazards. And then the tornado risk is about where the SPC put it, roughly. Then on Thursday, we have no slight risks. We have only the one marginal risk. So Missouri's getting in the act, Illinois, almost all of Kansas, the Front Range, a little bit of North Dakota, and again out here through Virginia and Maryland and maybe not quite Delaware. Tornado risk almost imperceivable, maybe a little bit there in North Dakota. Hail and wind risks, there are 15% patches, but not exactly widespread. And again, note that the Carolinas of Southern Virginia in the risk again. This is Thursday. I did want to show you, we do use this product, StormNet, once in a while. And it's just a little blip here, but I did want to show you a tornado risk that shows up Thursday for the evening and overnight hours into Friday morning. That's what this is up here, 7 p.m. to 7 a.m., a little blip there in Southern Illinois from a state that has had quite a few tornadoes this year. It's maybe why I showed that a little bit. Then on Friday, the Storm Prediction Center, if they were to pull the trigger on anything, it would be here on this panel, but they didn't. But I show this to you because it might be a future cause for concern. But again, note Virginia and the Carolinas showing up again on Friday. And then on Saturday, Virginia and the Carolinas. And then again on Sunday, maybe not Virginia, but the Carolinas getting down into Georgia, especially South Carolina. So there's a persistent pattern there. And it's because a high-pressure ridge is developing up here, and there's troughiness down in the eastern U.S. That does mean they'll cool off while these folks warm up, but it also does supply at least some energy at the jet stream level to maybe organize some of these storms down the road. So that's where that's coming from. Interestingly, though, if you look at NIU's product, it sums up supercell possibility. This doesn't really show up very intensely for the next week as in terms of probability, but it does show up. Meanwhile, North Dakota up into Canada, little patches of the Midwest and the Corn Belt and up into the Great Lakes. And then week 2, which is July 14th through the 20th, again from Des Moines, Iowa, Illinois, straight northwest up into Canada, including the Dakotas and Minnesota. And then the week 3, this is actually showing up pretty intensely here, and so this is a pretty widespread area here, and this is starting to get into wind damage kind of country. When I look at this, I just think that jet stream is going to support Boeing segments of lines of storms that kind of do that over that period, maybe more than once. Again, this is a weak composite, so they sum up the probabilities for each pixel. It's not a specific forecast. It really can't be this many weeks out. So anyway, I just think that's interesting that we have that percentage going that far into July, almost to the end of July.